Hi, my name is Somit Kelkar. I'm a local biologist here in Oakland, and I taught at Skyline High School for 3 years. Today, we are standing in front of an outcrop of serpentine rock. Serpentine is the state rock of California, and the reason it's so special is this rock right here with that beautiful bluish-gray color. The reason it's so special is that this rock is very rare on land. It typically forms at subduction zones in deep ocean trenches, which is why it usually doesn't exist on the surface of the land. The reason it exists on land here in California and a few other places in the world is that sometimes, when there's a plate boundary, like there is off the coast of California, the oceanic plate will subduct under the continental plate, and as the oceanic plate slides back down into the mantle, the continental plate is scraping the top off the oceanic plate, and that scraping action can actually break up parts of the oceanic plate, get them stuck onto the continental plate, and then as the continents continue to move together, uplift will cause those chunks of oceanic plate mixed in with chunks of continental plate to be lifted up. That is basically what has created the Coast Ranges of California, which is why there are so many different rock types in the Coast Ranges, especially in the Oakland Hills. So this particular rock would have formed deep in the ocean in a subduction zone, so deep in like an ocean trench. And now it is sitting here at the surface of the land at about 800 feet elevation above sea level. This is the only major serpentine outcrop in all of Oakland. This is located in the hills of East Oakland, directly uphill from Fruitvale and just down the street from Skyline Boulevard. And because this rock is so rare on land and has such weird chemistry, it has more calcium than magnesium, which is highly unusual for rocks on land. It also has a bunch of other weird heavy metals in it. And because of those chemical properties, it's toxic to most plants. So serpentine outcrops are some of the only places left in California where invasive plants, like the ones we're standing over right now, haven't completely taken over. So in these exposed areas of serpentine rock, we still see the original native plant community that is otherwise practically extinct in this whole area. So some of the rarest plants in all of Oakland only grow in this neighborhood on these exposed serpentine slopes. And at least one of those plant species probably isn't found anywhere else.
I mean, first of all, let's talk about the uniqueness of Oakland. Oakland is probably the most geologically diverse city in the United States, hands down. And one of the most unique features in it is this escarpment of serpentine soils that we have kind of right at the East Oakland top of the ridge zone, which we're at right now. Because you've got this serpentine soils right at the surface, you've got the East Bay Regional Park over there, and then you've got this neighborhood with serpentine soils in it, and there's a lot of native plants that you'll find in the East Bay Regional Park, but then also into the neighborhood here that are rare in California, and even ones that are just rare to Oakland. And so what first brought me here was looking for this thing known as a jewel flower. It's a streptanthus flower, really gorgeous up close, and it's, you know, in the brassicales group, so similar to things like broccoli and stuff like that we eat, but with a really gorgeous flower. And this is dappled all throughout this neighborhood because it survives best on serpentine soils, because everything else has a hard time surviving there due to a lot of like heavy metals in there, like nickel and things like that. But that these plants have figured out how to live there, and so you end up with these very, very, very specific plant communities that show up in serpentine. One of the big dangers, though, for our serpentine habitat in Oakland is a lot of the non-native grasses that can actually thrive in these areas, smothering out the native plants. We have a lot of Mediterranean grasses that have showed up here that can also handle some of the serpentine soils and then choke out our natives. But there are ways that we can be managing the properties here in order to mitigate that and at least put pressure on those non-native grasses so that more of our natives can thrive here. So some of the non-native grasses can survive here because they come from similar climates as what we have in California, in this Mediterranean climate. So a lot of the grasses that we struggle with in the serpentine zone are ones that came from the southern portion of the Mediterranean. So they're used to dealing with our kind of weather pattern, right? Which is rain during the winter, hot, dry, long periods, and you've got to make a specific seed type in order to handle that type of climate. And so that's why they're able to survive here. And then some of them have just learned to survive on really, really poor soils. And so that's why they end up being strong competitors in these environments. In some of the Mediterranean environments that we see these competitive grasses come from, they can have similar kind of geological structure to us, and that's why these plants have evolved to deal with these type of soils. They've also got a lot of plate tectonic work or volcanic action that's caused really exposed soils with, you know, high minerality that would usually exclude most other plants. And we also see some plants get here from places like Chile that have very similar habitats to us as far as the geology and the soil compositions, and some of those will also do well here against some of our native plants as well. But beyond even just the plants, we've got specific fungi that will only survive in our serpentine zones. I don't see any directly right here, but we have a lot of lichens that are more or less serpentine specialists, and we will find those in Oakland on the Serpentine. So if you're going around the Serpentine, you'll find kind of bright red and bright yellow small dots, more or less, and those are some very serpentine specific lichens. And so it's an entire kind of catalog of biodiversity that ends up showing up in these zones to deal with how do you live in this poor nutrient, high metal content soils.
This neighborhood started being constructed in the mid-1950s, so before that, this entire area was probably just a vast expanse of this rare plant community. Now that the ecosystem has been highly modified by construction and also road maintenance activities, and then also people clearing vegetation for wildfire risk, over the years, I think a lot of native species that should be here have been locally extirpated, especially from these like roadside or median areas. And one of the plants that's supposed to be here is actually the rarest plant species in Oakland. It's called the Presidio clarkia, and it has the California rare plant rank 1B1, which basically means it's as close to extinction as a species can get without being extinct. That plant was first discovered in the Presidio of San Francisco on serpentine rock, and then another botanist was able to find it here in Oakland on the serpentine outcrop, and then realized after some genetic studies that actually, it was a different botanist, but yeah. And then later on, some genetic studies showed that the Oakland population is actually significantly distinct from the San Francisco population. So they're currently classified as still the same species that's found in two different locations. But I think for conservation purposes, they should be considered distinct species, in which case the Oakland population, well, this is the only place it exists. I've got these pink flags because I was able to get in touch with the city park supervisor who oversees vegetation management for this area, and the city of Oakland is under a lot of pressure to basically just remove all the vegetation during the dry season to prevent wildfires because the surrounding neighborhoods are at risk of wildfire. The thing is, the Serpentine barren ecosystem, which is what we're standing on right now, is naturally very fire resistant because the plants typically live pretty far apart and there's all this bare gravel between the plants. And that basically means that if a fire comes through here, it's not going to have enough continuity of fuel to keep spreading through the landscape. Unfortunately, most of this area is now completely taken up by these fast-growing invasive plants, which you can see behind us, these thickets of dry brown grass like over there. Oh yeah, and over there. And those types of plant communities are going to carry fires really quickly. So what I'm doing right now is marking out the sensitive plant communities full of native species over here, and that way the city crews who come tomorrow to remove vegetation to manage wildfire risk will know not to remove the native vegetation that I mark with flags, and they'll only remove the invasive vegetation that is not going to be marked with flags and constitutes the greatest fire risk. So it's a win-win for the ecosystem and for people who are worried about fire.